Welcome to today's episode of Insights with Us. I'm Anastasia, a trauma therapist, owner of Happy Mind Wellness Company, a Colorado-based therapy practice, and creator of this podcast. My goal is to use this platform to help others find their voice and learn more about ourselves in life as we share our journeys. Growth happens when we get uncomfortable, which happens when we sit with new ideas that we haven't sat with before. I hope that we can work on this journey of personal growth and understanding together. As a disclaimer, there may be swearing in this podcast, but sometimes we get caught up in the human experience. It happens. And sometimes we can talk about difficult or activating topics. So maybe put on some headphones if you need to, and remember that support exists for you if you want it. I want to explore values with you today. Because while we all know and often share values like family, kindness, acceptance, knowledge, or purpose, we don't necessarily share the definition within those values. Gaining insight into what our values are for the current season of our lives and how we identify and try to show up in them can help us be intentional in our decisions, strengthen our sense of self, and build the life that we want. Before we get started, for those of you watching on Substack, I am wearing my Snacks and Naps shirt from my partner, Occupied Mind. They have a shirt for everything. And because I care about the values of comfort and health, Snacks and Naps seems like a great shirt for today's episode. You can find a shirt that fits your vibe at occupiedmind.com and use code INSIGHTSWITHUS15 for a discount at checkout. So, values. There is a therapeutic exercise called the values card sort that I was taught way back in graduate school. I was given a large stack of cards, each with a different value printed on them, and asked to place them into 5 different categories. Very important, important, neutral, not important, and not at all important. At the end of the exercise, you have a gradient of what matters most to you in your life to what matters least. I loved this tool because values are what guide us in life, whether we are conscious of it or not. If you care most about being a kind person, you're going to try to be kind to almost everyone you meet. If you care the most about wealth and ambition, your choices are going to reflect that as you fight your way to the top of your career. You don't have to explicitly name your values in order to be guided by them. But as I said, being able to name your values helps you steer your life more intentionally. It gives us insight. When COVID hit and I had to adapt to telehealth services, handing my clients a deck of value cards was no longer a viable option. So I created a values brainstorm. I have done this exercise I'm going to share with you today with the majority of my clients. And I myself complete it every few years as a check-in to see where I'm at and what direction I need to lean towards next. I know you're all wondering, but how can I do the values brainstorm if I'm not your client? I have another thing to share with you today. I have so many dreams, passions, and projects that I am working on. And I started this podcast in the middle of all of the chaos, not really knowing what I was doing, but knowing that it felt important. I'm starting to figure it all out, and I am expanding my offerings to all of you. On my business website, happymindwellness.com, you can find and buy for just $1 the values brainstorm that I'm going to explore with you today. So if what we talk about sounds interesting to you, know that you can try it for yourselves without being my client for just $1. I'm excited. I have been working on digital downloads for a while. You don't even know. And I have several that are still in the works, but this one felt like a really good place to start. Because again, starting with values helps us understand where we want to go next. So let's explore my values. An important note is that our top values, what is most important, can change. You're not stuck in what was once important to you. And if it has shifted, let yourself shift. A great example of this was at one point in my life, I was looking for adventure, community, excitement, and fun. These values were the ones that are at the top of my list at that point in time. And I found someone and was dating someone who completely embodied those values to the point that I never really got a break. I became burned out with group events, traveling with 15 plus people, and my calendar was completely booked. When COVID hit, I almost had some relief of, oh, thank God it's going to stop for a minute. But we had 5 roommates. So even though we stopped traveling, I was never alone. After lockdown ended and things were starting to shift back to some form of normalcy, I took a moment to complete the values brainstorm exercise and figured out what had shifted for me. And suddenly, at the top of my list were values like solitude, acceptance, and comfort. My values shifted as my needs shifted, and I was able to be flexible and adapt. This doesn't mean that community or adventure stopped being important. They just didn't make it to the top of the list. So this week, I ran through my values again. I hadn't done this in a few years, and I've made a lot of changes to my life in the last 7 months. And so it was time for a check-in to see what has shifted and what I'm moving towards right now. And that's what I'm going to share with all of you. I'm going to share my experience going through this values brainstorm. My first step, and if you choose to do it, your first step, would be to circle every value that spoke to me. On my list, I had 21 items. It's quite a few. In the past, I've had more and also less, depending on what season of my life I was in and what was speaking to me in that moment. So really, there's no right or wrong. Just circle anything that speaks to you. From there, I pared it down and ranked my top 10. Questions that I ask myself or my clients as I do this include: which values are important but not the most important? Cross these off. Are there any values that in my mind are linked together? For example, acceptance and self-acceptance. You might be able to choose only one of those. One might be a more umbrella term. And then once I have under 15, sometimes I keep 15 if they all feel really important, or I rank my top 10 in order of most important to less important. They're all on the important category. So this season, my top values in order were inner peace, purpose, acceptance, knowledge, safety, fun, creativity, health, justice, and comfort. I mentioned at the start of this episode that while you might know or even share some of these values with me, we could define them differently and recognize them in our lives in different ways. And that's okay. In fact, I encourage it. The goal is not to match my values, but to understand how I see them and how you see them, and being able to accept our differences. This helps us gain insight and helps us understand where we're miscommunicating, how our actions might not line up with our words. And it's not the be-all, end-all of solving problems, but it is a start. For example, fun for one person might be concerts every week, drinking with friends, and staying out late into the night. If this fits your definition, I love that for you. Fun for me is defined as getting out into nature, cuddling on the couch with Juliet while I crochet, and trying new places to eat with my partner. So when I say I want to have more fun, it could mean something very different from how you mean it. And if you tell me, hey, I want to have more fun, can you make that happen for me? Well, I might plan something that you might not actually count as fun. So again, we need to be able to talk about these differences and gain insight into how we define it and what it looks like for us in our lives. Once I ranked my top 10, I took a moment to slow down in each of these values and explore my own definition. I personally like to write down and journal about these values because it creates a physical representation of my roadmap that I can then look at and review. So you can journal them. If you want, you could type them up, or you could just grab some coffee and think about your definitions one at a time. That's okay too. Just pause in it and find that curiosity of what makes this value important to me? How would I define it to someone else? How do I want it to show up in my life? Is it already showing up that way, or is it something that I feel is lacking? Be curious about what this value means to you right now in this season of your life. After writing down each definition, I take a moment to review what I wrote. I look at what surprised me, what didn't, what felt obvious, and how they show up in this season of my life. Honestly, I was initially surprised that a value like love or family or friendship or community did not make my top 10 because they have been priorities for me for the first half of this year. But this is why regularly checking in with our values matters. Because in the last month or so, I have felt very connected to my community. And my values are reflecting that. They have already shifted just in a month. I no longer need those values to be in my top 10. And my roadmap is leading me towards something else. Towards values that I want to strengthen and focus on in this new season. So as I was reviewing it all, there were 3 values that really stuck out to me. And those were purpose, safety, and justice. Because in my current definition, I don't just mean them for me and my personal life, though I have in the past. These 3 values really relate to my career right now, these passion projects of mine. And I am trying to build a movement towards acceptance for all, letting each person be their authentic selves without judgment, no matter what you believe or who you are. This is what drives me. It is my purpose. And, I started small with this purpose of mine, supporting my friends and family. Once I got my degree, I got to support people in one-on-one therapy, helping a single person, one at a time, find their authentic self. But I'm building on that now. I am finding ways to grow my purpose, expand my reach, and it is helping me access my sense of justice. Because you deserve to be exactly who you are, and you deserve love simply because you exist. I want to make sure that no one, not even me, tries to tell you to show up differently or to hold a certain belief that you don't actually believe. And if you are listening to this and you're thinking, yes, I want to be exactly who I am, but this particular identity, they can fuck right off. Well, then I would take a moment for curiosity and wonder why someone else being their true self upsets you so much. And I'm not saying to accept someone who is trying to impose their beliefs on you. That's what we want to stop. But if your friend is religious and not imposing their beliefs, can you accept them for who they are and their religion? If your neighbor looks differently than you or loves differently than you and is not trying to convince you to be just like them, can you let them be themselves? We are all trying to figure out how to show up in this world every day. And once you let go of what does not belong to you or affect you, it makes it a lot easier to show up as your authentic self because you're not trying to control everything. Insight into our values and the values of others can help us understand what is ours and what is theirs. Again, it's not everything. It's not the whole answer, but it's one piece of the puzzle. So for example, if we enter a new season in our lives and our values shift, this could lead to miscommunications or uncertainty within relationships, like that example of what does fun even mean? So if I have always been into fun and adventure and I show up every single week with my friends and I connect and we go out and we party and we, spend every second together, and then I enter a new season and I'm suddenly focusing on inner peace, comfort, and calm, my friends or my partner, They might be confused about why I am suddenly saying no to all of these events that I always used to say yes to. If you want to prioritize a value that differs from the values of your partner, how can you accept them and their values while being true to yourself and accept that your values currently don't align? Because it's okay that they don't. But how do you move through time when it isn't in alignment? First, you need to be able to know what your values are. Hence, the values brainstorm exercise that I just shared with you. It's simple. It's short. It's just $1. Go try it. But if I'm prioritizing inner peace and comfort and my partner is prioritizing connection and excitement, we are going to want to show up differently. And we need to be able to accept that the other person will not match our energy. It is not my partner's job to prioritize comfort with me, just like it is not my job to embrace excitement for him. Instead, I can support his need for excitement and even offer events for him to go to while I stay home and relax, and he needs to accept that that's what I want to do. And actually, as I'm writing this script, I am reminded of a conversation that I had with him where he wanted to prioritize himself. He wanted peace and solitude and comfort, and he wanted to spend some time alone. And he asked if I would be able to give him the space to do so. And if I could, he would really appreciate it. And this is great that he was able to ask for that, because actually it aligns with my values and intention for this week. I have been wanting inner peace and comfort and leaning into creativity a little bit, which is one of my top values. And him wanting that alone time allows me to work on some of the projects that I'm not able to do unless I'm alone, like recording this podcast. So actually, my partner and I are in alignment this week at the time of recording. And this isn't always the case, and it's not going to be the case always, but it is right now, and that feels pretty good. But the difference is we do check in with each other. We intentionally name our values, our priorities, what we're hoping for, and we can support each other as they shift and change. Can you do that? If you can't, what gets in the way? Be curious. And sometimes, with a lot of us, what can get in the way is knowing what is yours and what is theirs. Because if they're a loved one, whether they're a friend or a partner or a family member, it gets enmeshed, it gets complicated because they're a part of your system, which means there's going to be times where your values can be met by other people. It all goes together. But once we know what our values are and how we hope to show up in them in our lives, we can also start to find the balance within our values. For example, if kindness is important to you, then it makes sense that you want to be kind to everyone you meet. But if all you care about is kindness and you don't think about the complexity and layers of the human experience, you might forget your limits, your boundaries, and your own needs. You might say yes to everyone around you and forget that sometimes being kind is saying no. If you only care about achievement or wealth and you're willing to do anything to climb the ladder, you might end up hurting people close to you along the way. And maybe you don't care about other people. And if you take advantage of them, you only feel happy because of what it gave you. But if that's true, why are you listening to my podcast? There must be something more going on if you have gotten this far into this journey with me. And I'm glad you're here. Be curious. Lean in. Get uncomfortable. Maybe you can get some insight about yourself and what's guiding you. So, what I want to say about this balance is being able to recognize what is yours to hold, therefore your choices, your values to embody, your roadmap, and what belongs to someone else, their choices, their values, their roadmap. being able to differentiate this is kind of a superpower. If it isn't yours to hold, then it isn't your values that need to guide that decision, which means you can just let it go. You don't have to hold the stress related to that decision. It's someone else's job. It is the person that you are trying to help, support, or guide who needs to understand their values in order to make that decision. And you can support them in that, but you shouldn't take it on for them. We tend to think that if we are struggling, our support system needs to show up exactly the way that we need them to in order to help us through it. This would be great if it were possible. But we are all different people, which means we cannot always show up perfectly. And this goes both ways. Sometimes our loved one is struggling and we want to take their pain for them and fix it, make it better. But it isn't ours to hold. We need to be able to be kind and supportive and listen to them and try to understand their hurt and remind them that they're not alone, but not actually try to take their pain from them or tell them who to be or how to show up or what to do next. It's not our job. I like to think of journeys as a giant stack of books. We all carry them around. Each book is related to a different category in life. So like I've got my career book, my personal life, my family, my friends, my time with Juliet, my adventures, my workouts. Every category is its own book. And I am carrying them all around in a giant stack. Sometimes it'll feel easier to carry. Like I remembered my backpack, so some of them kind of go in there. Sometimes they're piled high in my arms and I'm struggling to hold them all. When I see a loved one struggling, sometimes I want to take their books for them, but it makes my pile higher and heavier. Or as they struggle, they decide they're tired of holding their books and they try to convince me to take it for them. For example, during COVID, one of my roommates, who was pretty extroverted, had never really learned how to be alone. This made him extremely uncomfortable, and understandably so. I felt for him. His way of dealing with it was anytime I wasn't in my office with a client, he was by my side wanting company. He tried to never be alone. He tried to hand me his books, but I couldn't take them because I needed alone time. I wanted silence and peace and solitude. And so I had to set boundaries, and I helped him learn how to carry his books by himself. It took a while, and there was some friction, quite a bit of discomfort. But honestly, we ended up having a pretty great friendship by the end of lockdown. And I am so grateful to him for the friendship that we shared. Another example is sexual identity. If someone is straight and doesn't understand how someone could be gay, or even tries to say that it's wrong or bad, that straight person is trying to take the gay person's books, trying to convince them to feel or be different. But trying to tell someone who they can and can't marry, who they are or are not supposed to love, that's trying to take their books. Telling them that they're going to hell for finding love, that's trying to take their books. It's like trying to tell someone they can't eat cake because you're on a diet. It's trying to take their books. It's not your job. Don't take people's books, and don't try to make them carry your books. They need to hold their own books because in an effort to change or fix them, you might end up neglecting your own pile. Your values are the roadmap that helps you understand what books you're holding, how you want to be holding them, which order you want to read them in, and what book you want to pick up next. Insight into others' values helps you understand what books they are holding and why. Just because you might be holding different books or have a different story or have different values doesn't make either of you wrong. It just makes you different. I'm going to repeat this 1,000 times in this podcast. Just because you are different doesn't make you wrong. It just makes you different. So, try asking someone who is different from you about their values, what their dreams are, what's guiding them, and how they define the values that are guiding them. You might be surprised that you have more in common than you thought. It's just how we show up in them might look different, and that's okay. Let your values guide you. And if at any point you feel lost or confused, return to your values to help you find your direction again. At least, that's what I do. Hopefully something we talked about today resonated with you. If it did, let yourself sit with that idea for a little while longer. If you have any questions for this podcast or any themes you'd like us to focus on in the future, send us a message on Instagram at Insights With Us Podcast, or send us an email at insightswithus@gmail.com. If you enjoyed this podcast and want to hear more, please follow, like, or subscribe. If you want to support the continuation of this podcast, you can donate. To do so, find me, Anastasia Soroka, on buymeacoffee.com. You can find Insights With Us on Substack for exclusive content, including videos, transcripts from these episodes, and other writings about my insight journey. You can also buy the Values Brainstorm at happymindwellness.com for just $1. I appreciate you, and I appreciate that you are listening. Thank you for creating insight with us.